We have Chief Correspondent Ed Lingao to parse through this decision, at least as far as it has been released to us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Bok.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's go over the verdict. It's not clear so far what the actual basis is, but then let's sift through the Ampatuans, who were found guilty and who weren't.
Well, you would have a verdict that I think is partially acceptable to some of the victims. I say partially because you have the major Ampatuan principals who are being named. Of course, you don't have Ampatuan Senior, and the Ampatuan Senior who died in 2015. That also is a source of heartbreak for some of the victims' families. And you have also some acquittals of the Ampatuan family, like Sajid Islam and Ahmad Tato. Although the police never really identified them to be part of the killing group, the one that was in Masalay, in Barangay Salman, they were included as well in the list of accused.
Okay.
Right. Ed, you've been covering this case since the beginning. Are any of these decisions, at least with the Ampatuan family in this context, anything surprising or a little out of place?
I'd say that for most people, the convictions are not surprising considering the number of people who have come forward, who have testified, and who have singled out specifically Andal Jr., who's Unsay, and as well Zaldi and Senior. Of course, he's not included anymore. But they've been specifically named, not just in the planning group from July 2009 to November 16, then November 21, 2009, to the actual day of November 23, 2009. That was the day when there was the actual killing. So most of these principals were identified to have been there in all these events, if not most.
We're talking about, of course, the two Andal, Senior and Junior, and Zaldi, right?
Yes.
They were kind of kumbaga sila yung bida nitong story.
Right. Still on the Ampatuans, those who were acquitted of murder charges due to reasonable doubt were Datu Ahmad, Datu Sajid Islam, Jonathan, Jimmy, and several other police officers. What do we make of this, Ed? Insofar as the evidence is concerned, leading up to this, was there any indication that these individuals would be segmented from the others?
I think the best indication you could have was the fact that Sajid Islam was granted bail.
I see.
And that in itself was telling.
That was an indication.
Yeah, and then he was acquitted. As for the rest, I'm not exactly sure. I don't think they were granted bail as well. But for Sajid Islam, when he was granted bail, it was a clear signal that that the court did not find, or possibly could not have found reasonable doubt at the time.
Right. Talking about
the police officers.
talking about the police officers. But then one key thing to consider here is that the sentence was just for 57 counts of murder. There was one omission. Could you tell us more about this?
Talking
no
about
body, no murder.
You're
that
talking
applies,
about
right?
Rinaldo Momay, who's a photojournalist based in Sultan Kudarat. I forget if it's in Sulan or Takurong, but he is from Sultan Kudarat. He was killed. At the very least, he's still missing until now. So the family of Rinaldo Momay fought for at least a decade to have him included in the number of victims who were listed. Initially, the police only could identify 57 bodies, victims. But Momay was the 58th, but his body was never found. What they found, and even that is not so clear, what they found were dentures that appeared to belong to Momay.
But that was never confirmed.
But that was never confirmed.
You did speak to the daughter of Momay, Reina Fe. She
Yes,
has been quite vocal, of course, in the days leading up to today's
In fact, she's one of the more active members of the families of the victims. Even during the time when her father was not yet included in the list of victims, she was very, very active because she said, I remember her telling us that, you have so many victims. My father is not even listed as a victim, but if I persist in fighting for justice, then so should you.
Right. Let's focus on the procedure here. Bok, the counsel for the heirs of Reynaldo Momay, Harry Roque, is saying that he will file an appeal. But
I'd like to ask a lawyer.
Exactly.
How does that work?
How does he intend to get around the double jeopardy rule, if in case it's applicable in this case? We haven't seen the decision yet. But then, so far, it appears that there is an acquittal on the merits here, and it would be subject to double jeopardy. I mean, we haven't read the actual body of the decision, so
Is
what do
that
you make of it?
automatic? If they're not convicted for the 58th victim, then therefore they are acquitted?
No, if
for the
there is a trial on the merits, and according to the evidence, there's not enough evidence to convict based on the 58th victim, then the acquittal stands, and you cannot appeal that acquittal anymore. That's that's actually subject to the rule on double jeopardy already.
Yeah.
But then in this case, I'm not sure how Attorney Roque will get around it.
Because the Momay family thought as early as 2015 that that the case was already included, at least their father's case was already included in the list of victims, which would make them the 58th victim. They were banking on the idea that a person who is missing can be legally declared dead after so many years. But then again, I'm not that familiar with how that law works. So with that in mind, they pursued the case until the end, and Reina Fe was pretty surprised
Now, this
and
is one,
pretty torn.
Yeah, one of the things we need to watch out for when the decision is actually released to the public is the basis for the court to find that this 58th victim was not included, I suppose.
Okay. So, still, of course, on the case, of course, pending the motions of reconsideration that I guess
Yes.
is
And
the
you would,
next
I
best
suppose
thing.
you would expect that they will
Yeah.
file they will
For
file
sure.
an MR, and
Yes.
they will probably appeal it. I don't know how far up. I suppose it should go to the CA, or they could go straight up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, well, that's...
And let's
one of the
look at
things,
this from another angle, though. We talked about, of course, the legalities of this. I'm sure the lawyers, who are some of the best in the country, will go through all the necessary...
700
all the
pages.
take
sensitive
all
pages.
the all the possible routes that they can, right? But if we're talking about press freedom here, this event has labeled the Philippines as the most dangerous place in the world for journalists, and you, of course, also with other observer journalists from other countries. Do you think they are satisfied with this decision and how it was carried out as well?
I think there are mixed feelings, but while there are mixed feelings, there's also a general feeling of success, at least on the part of pushing against impunity, against the killing of journalists without any concern of conviction. Because this may be the first case. Well, not the first case, because the first case would have been the case of Marilyn Esparat.
Yes, where the mastermind was included.
Was included. But then again, we don't know how far up it really went. Because the masterminds in the Marilyn Esparat case were just minor officials, regional officials of the Department of Agriculture. But in any case, this could be the biggest case of masterminds being convicted for the killing of journalists.
Right. One other interesting point here is this finding against Sajid Islam Ampatuan, who was acquitted, but he was not at the actual promulgation. What happened there?
Yes. Well, he's out on bail, and the fact that you're out on bail means that the court expects you to come back for a promulgation. And as the collaborating counsel said, they will file a pleading as to, or at least a justification as to why he was not there. But then again, you already have an arrest warrant. So it was actually, from their end, I suppose it was a wasted opportunity for him to appear and not to have to face an arrest warrant.